Hello again, and we welcome Dr. Brovkin as a returning guest to our program. Today, we will be talking about Hungarian position in European Union on the ongoing conflict of Russia and Ukraine. As you know, that the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict has not only reshaped the geopolitical dynamics, but has also put Hungarian leadership in a unique position within the European Union. So, Dr. Brovkin, welcome to the show. Will you be able to explain what the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's strategic leadership is on these issues and why they have taken such a unique position? And you must have heard the foreign minister speaking in the United Nations
Yes, I have.
last
Yes,
week.
yes,
So, could
yes,
you
I
please
did.
explain a little bit more?
Yes, of course. I think the best way, let's start with the present and then try to look for some of the explanations, at least in the past, in history.
Sure.
So obviously, Hungary's position is a kind of a rebel, a dissident in this concept that today the leadership of Europe. But let's not forget that if we look at Europe like 20 years ago, when President Chirac and Chancellor Schröder walked together, holding hands and voting together against American aggression in Iraq, the position of Hungary was not that different than the mainstream of Europe. At that time, the mainstream of Europe, Italy, France, Germany had perfect relations with Russia. Berlusconi was hugging Putin in a way that it is his eyes shining, and I have this photograph that is like a real friend. He invited him to Sardinia, to his house, etc. So at that time, and this is irrelevant because in his speech to the United Nations, that's the kind of Europe the Hungarians thought they were going to have. A Europe of cooperation. Our common European home was the language at the time, that this is post-communism, that this is common values, which means common values of humanity and humanism and market economy and democracy. And the expression at that time was from Lisbon to Vladivostok.
Mm-hmm.
And this expression from Lisbon to Vladivostok actually belongs to General de Gaulle, who came up with this idea that seemed to be absurd in 1966. But that was the dream. And so the Hungarians explained that that was the dream realized after the fall of communism and of the Soviet Empire. Now we're all together. Now we're going to live together in one European home with these values. That was the idea. Now, in my book, again, I always refer to it from Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin. What I actually talk about is the parting of the ways between Europe and Russia. And that was what I call a missed opportunity. This time, the 90s and the early 21st century were the years of the missed historical opportunity. If things go the way they do, it may well come out to nuclear war and destruction of Europe and Russia and America and God knows what else. So that was the historical opportunity to turn the page of the hostilities. And this is where I think Hungary is done is incredible job. They were the ones who suffered under the Soviet occupation. They were the ones who went through the brutal suppression of their revolution of 1956. And yet, when communism was gone, it was gone. I mean, Russia and Putin is not the Soviet Russia, is not the communist Russia. It is no longer interested in an empire. It is interested in keeping Russians with Russia. Anyway, so this is one explanation that, in a sense, Hungary takes the position that many European countries had 20 years ago. Then what happened is that after 2014, the Europeans were very frightened by Crimea refusing to acknowledge the new government in Kiev, and and so it became Russian, and there began a process of major European powers estranging themselves from Russia, and especially from Putin. Now, my personal view, and many may not agree with me, but this is made in the USA. I think this whole sort of plan to create a divide, to drive a wedge between Europe and Russia is made in the USA. It's the Americans who got scared of the 2003 bloc, Russia, France, Germany. It is the plans to create a kind of a economic bond through the oil and gas connection between Germany. It's massive investment of Germans in Russian industry. There was a BMW plant opened, and there are many, many, many joint projects. Americans got scared that Europe would have more economic ties with Russia than with the United States, but even more so with China, because this whole One Belt, One Road initiative, it ties continental Russia, China into one big belt to Europe. And if this trade would go through Russia and not through the seas that British American ships control, then this is a nightmare for the Americans. You are going to have united Eurasia, at least economically united, because Europeans do need Russian gas. There's no way about it. They need it even now. They're buying it through India, but they're still buying it and paying more for it. So I think that's the reason that this estrangement was created in America by the seizure of power in Ukraine. Ukraine was yours, now it's going to be ours. And Russia said no. Well, no, when we don't care that you say no. Then Putin said, no, let's have a new architecture of security for everybody. This is December 2021. They said, nah, no, we're not interested. Well, then they started shooting at Donetsk, and Putin said, well, enough is enough. And he moved in the troops to force Ukrainian government to negotiate peace, which they did. And then we discussed it last time. Boris Johnson put an end to it, and the war continued. But back to Hungary. What they showed in their speech to the United Nations is that they hoped to create a kind of a European home for everybody. Now, let me go back a little bit for history, because why does Hungary play such a role? And I think the answer is historical. Let's not forget, even though Hungary is a small country, a rather small country, but it used to be 100 years ago, plus 10, before World War I, Austria-Hungary. It was a great power. It was a great power, equal to Germany, to France, to Britain and Russia. It was one of 5 major European powers. Moreover, in terms of culture, this was that Austria-Hungary at the turn of the 20th century is like the beacon of culture, with its philosophy, even with its Marxism, with its painting, with its music, Klimt, and I mean, you name it. It was, and they know it, and they feel they're a part of it. European culture for them is that their big part of it is in Austria-Hungary. Therefore, even though Austria-Hungary is no more, they feel they're a part of it historically, and they have this kind of a attitude that they are to be respected, they are to be listened to. And in fact, many of them feel they have much more culture than the Americans ever did. So in that point of view, they feel, yeah, we have a right to say what we think Europe should be like. And also, I want to remind you that I remember very well the days of Soviet Hungary in the 1970s and 80s. They were the champions of being a part of Europe, where they were saying, we're Central Europe, we're in the center of Europe. And this is, again, a special kind of mentality, not Western Europe. Like, you know, for the British, it's England and the continent. And yes, like everything's on the continent. And for them, it doesn't make any difference. You know, Asia starts, you know, on the continent. For the Hungarians, it's different. They are like in the center of Europe, and they feel that they are a bridge. For them, Russia is Europe. how could be? I mean, it's always been like this since Peter the Great. So you cannot simply say, okay, Europe stops at the Hungarian border or at the Ukrainian border. It is like Russia is a partner and has been for centuries. I mean, look, before 1890s, it was a pact between three empires, Russian, German, and Austrian. So the cultural, political, military connection goes, for centuries. And that also kind of explains why they feel they have a right to express their own view as to how things should be going.
Can you explain a little bit how the relationship between Hungary and Russia has been after the dissolution of Soviet Union?
Yes, it was, as I said, in the 90s there was chaos and not much. Russia was not interested in anything but survival. But beginning with Putin, as I said, the first decade of the 21st century, most of Europe was focused on normal, good trade relations, neighbor relations, creating one common European home. Now, the first problem appeared when, in 2008, the Americans declared in Budapest, I
Mhm.
think, that Georgia and Ukraine should be a part of NATO. This is the beginning of the partings of the ways. In 2007, Putin gave a great speech at the Munich
Security
Security
conference.
Conference. Yes, which he spoke about American claim to be ahead of everybody and ordering people around, and we're going to be different. So Hungary pretty much stayed where they were, and there was no friendship really. There was no really a kind of a close ties. There was just normal neighborly relations. And with Ukraine too, Ukraine with all these ever-changing new presidents. As a matter of fact, by my job, I was in Ukraine many, many times. Like every 2 months, I used to go to Ukraine in the year 2000, 2001. And one time with a group of Ukrainian parliamentarians and journalists and stuff like that, we went together to Hungary for a conference, and there were really, really good relations of Hungarians to the Ukrainians and to the Russians, equally good. They're neighbors, they're friends, there's trade. So even at that time, Hungary had more European and American institutions than anybody else. They wanted to create this feeling that they can be with both. They could be with the West, they could be with the East, they could be a kind of like what Qatar is trying to do is to be friends with everybody and to be a meeting point. And this is pretty much what Hungary tried to do in those days. And of course, there were gas deliveries to Hungary. And as time went on and Europe began refusing to use Russian gas, the Hungarians kept saying that we need that. And Putin said that's fine. And so that cooperation continued. And then it seems like they've had what they've had all along, but the European Union leadership, became really anti-Russian, whereas the Hungarians simply kept the way they were. They're not allies of Russia. They're not allies of Putin. They're critics, actually, of him. And their plan is not exactly what the Russians want. They simply are independent. They're sovereign. They say what they think. And I congratulate them on that, because some people just kind of swallow what they're given and don't have the courage to say what they really believe is right.
So let me ask you one thing. Is this the opinion of the or standing of the government, or that is the general, perception among the people, and that's how the people are thinking in Hungary?
See, I don't know, but because I haven't been to Hungary lately. But what I do know is that um, I watched um, what's his name? This American journalist who came to Hungary, the one that was expelled from Fox News. Um,
Okay, Tucker Carlson.
Yes, yes, yes. And he spoke in Hungary. It was a couple of months or several months ago.
Yes.
And the audience responded to him in a very enthusiastic way. And he was telling about, what the American sort of empire and the American projection of
Yes.
power. And the audience reacted in very, very similar ways in support of their leadership, in support of their independent stance, in support of their being the center of Europe, East and West. So, judging from the audience and the way they vote and the way they support their leader, it seems to me that the Hungarians like that role of being the center of Europe and being a meeting place and trying to reconcile the difficulties, which of course ties well with their position now, which they really want to find a negotiated solution to Russian-Ukraine conflict,
So
we
you
can
see,
discuss.
so you
Yeah.
see, many European countries, they really don't like Hungarian position and policies towards Russia, and Hungarian, government is many times criticized by the fellow European countries. So how hard it's going to be for the if the conflict is going to escalate? What do you think? How hard it will be for the Hungarian government to keep a balance between ties to Russia and their positioning into the European Union?
Yes, maybe what I will say will surprise you, and
All right.
and it will surprise many people, but I will say it anyway. I think this is the future. I think Hungary is now projecting that which will be the majority opinion in Europe in the coming years, months, I don't know. Let me explain. We had just elections in Austria, and the populist party that won is a party which mostly they call it extreme right and fascist and all this. These are just labels. What they want is to limit immigration, number one, and good relations with Russia and the end of the Ukrainian war. Number two, so this is the platform. In addition to some domestic issues, now the same position is of the Alternative for Germany, uh, and also of the Sarah Wagenknecht. Although they're different on domestic, they want to restore Germany's sovereignty from the Americans. They want to restore normal relations with Russia. They want to relaunch gas and oil flow from Russia, and they want to limit immigration. Now, the same position is actually of the Front Populaire in France and Marine Le Pen. They also labeled fascists and rightists and all that stuff, but that they're not. I live in France and I know what I'm saying. They're not fascists, they're not right wing. They are the ones who feel that there should be a limit to immigration, not the end, but the limit the immigration, and they also want normal relations with Russia. And I remember Marine Le Pen once asked, when I was young, we all knew that Crimea is Russia. Why
Mm-hmm.
in the world should I think differently now? Uh,
Okay.
so
Okay.
that's the position. In other words, it seems to me, and even Italians, the Italians they don't want to fight Russia. They say that we support Ukrainian independence. That's fine. I mean, Putin supports Ukrainian independence too. He's not going to swallow all of Ukraine. It's a
Mm-hmm.
question of Russian-speaking territories and no membership of NATO. If the Ukrainian government accepted these two positions, peace could come tomorrow. But they say, no, we need Donbass, we need NATO. Russia says, no, you're not going to get Donbass and you're not going to get NATO. So this is the cause of the war. In other words, to answer your question, it seems to me that in Southern Europe, especially, but moving north, in of course in the Balkans and in Greece and in Italy, and to some extent in Spain, but less so, and in Hungary and in Slovakia and in Austria, the movement is towards finding a negotiated settlement, ending the war, and restoring normal relations with Russia rather than moving towards war, as what Madame von der Leyen wants.
Okay. You just mentioned, the Qatar's policy, the friendship with all. So do you think some kind of hybrid, multi-party, multilateral kind of negotiation Hungary can lead, and the non-aligned countries which are friends with both Russia and Ukraine can play a pivotal role in towards a possible solution of the conflict?
Yes, yes. Let me elaborate on that, because this is a very complicated issue. It is complicated because these countries, they call themselves the Friends of Peace.
Mm-hmm.
And this is led by China, Brazil, supported by Hungary, and even according to the latest information, even Switzerland joined in this group. And Macron was kind of saying that maybe it has some legitimacy. So the difficulty is that these are the countries that are closest partners and friends of Russia, uh, without whom Russia can't exist. Without the
Okay.
support, economic support from India and from China, Russia would not be able to sustain a war and find a solution to the current crisis. Now, on the other hand, these countries can't live without Russia also, because the Chinese economy cannot live without Russian gas and oil, even if they wanted to. So there's a kind of a mutual interdependence. But I do believe that Brazil, especially, I listened to their speech, and China, for their own personal reasons, they want the conflict to end. They don't care really which border there would be there. So they say this needs to be negotiated. The reason they wanted to end, because this whole dream of China to create one belt, one road initiative cannot work as long as there's a war in Europe going on, because this is the road. It has to go through from Russia to Ukraine to Hungary and to the rest of Europe. One could find a ways around it, but if Poland is blocked and doesn't want to talk to Russia, if Ukraine is out of the question, then you only have a way through the Mediterranean, which is not very effective. So China needs peace for its own economic reach to Europe. Brazil wants to play a major role. It wants to be in the Security Council, which I think it deserves. It's a big Latin American country, and why should Europe, a small continent, have three memberships? Well, two if you count Western Europe, France and England. So anyway, this is why Lulu wants to play this role. And again, he doesn't care which border there would be, as long as there's a negotiated settlement. Now, the difficulty, I repeat this word more and more and more, because this position is not what Russia wants.
Mm-hmm.
Is not what Russia wants. And it's very difficult for Putin to say to his friends, sorry, but that's not what we want. So let me try to explain, what does Russia want and what do they want? They want peace, and they don't care which border there would be. But Russians do care. And it's not only that Putin can do whatever he wants. This is a mistake. There's a dictator and blah, blah, blah. No, there is a public opinion. And after so many people died, after, I don't know, 30, 40, what's the official figure? 100,000 Russian men died, as they call it, liberating Donbass. They are not going to stop at the current border, current line of demarcation. No, and that Putin has already said. There's nothing to talk about unless all of Donbass, 4 provinces, go to Russia. They are officially by constitution Russia, but that's not enough, because a lot of Russians are saying, why not Odessa? Why not Kharkov? This is also Novorossiya. This is also Russian people. Why should we leave it to the neo-Nazis? So there's this kind of a debate going on in Russia. Where do we stop? And a moderate position is that we can take Odessa and Kharkov and stop there. That's the end of Novorossiya. Now, others of people are saying, okay, fine, maybe the rest of it is Ukraine, but where is the guarantee that if we stop, they will join NATO, as they're openly talking about? After the war, it will be in NATO. This new general secretary of NATO says this, and the Americans are saying this. So the Russians say, no. We led this war to make certain that Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. So even if we liberate just Novorossiya. The rest of Ukraine cannot be in NATO. And it's not a matter of just us saying that or they saying that. What Putin wants is an international treaty, pretty much like the one of Austria, guaranteed by all major powers, that an international binding treaty that NATO will not expand anywhere. And that would include Moldova and Georgia. That's what Putin wants. And I think that the Chinese and the Brazilians would go along with this because that's reasonable. No NATO expansion.
You're right. You're right. So you see, so far, what I understood from, the conversation, how Hungary has been, in a difficult position. Can you explain a little bit that why Hungary has failed, or do it has failed to, take on board the fellow European countries on the same policy which Hungary has been adopting?
Yes, well, there's one other aspect of Hungarian position which is also needs to be kind of taken into account, which is cultural. And with that, even though they have different policy to Russia, they are similar to Poland. Which is a conservative values position. That's what I call it. They don't like woke culture. They don't like gays marriages. They don't like abolishing everything and including pronouns. It's a he and a she and none of that other stuff. So, and then they proclaim themselves the leader in that too. And in that, they're very similar to Visegrad Group, which is, of course, Czech Republic and Slovakia and Poland and Hungary. So culturally, and Poland in that fight is together with them. So they're both rebels against the kind of Western craziness and these gay parades, which is so weird when I saw one myself in London. It is just, and what Macron made a disgusting show with the Olympics, insulting Christianity and so on. So Hungarians, they like what Putin is doing. They're saying Putin's position is, yes, gays can live whatever life they want, anything. It's not prohibited. It's fine. But that's not going to be official Russian government policy. No, it's a private matter, but we will not allow to teach this stuff in schools. We will not allow it to be official government position, and so on. So in the cultural aspect, Hungary is again a rebel, and it has allies in Poland, as opposed to now we have very divergent policies. You have Northern European countries, which is Poland and von der Leyen and Borrell and Scholz and Macron. They're anti-Russian. But it's beginning to change. As I said, it has already a little bit shifted in Italy. It is definitely shifted in Austria. Now, the more Alternative for Germany wins in Germany, the more likely it is that the next government in Germany would be much more interested in restoring normal relations with Russia. And I think the trend is going in the same direction in France, because it's only by Macron's manipulation that the National Front is not a part of government. It could well be. Moreover, even if you look at Mélenchon and the left, they're not in favor of war with Russia either. So it's like Macron's, it's his own idea that he cannot even push through his own Assemblée Nationale. So the winds in Europe are going not in the direction of Americans, but in the direction against the Americans and for restoring normal relations with Russia. A lot depends now on Putin's skill as a negotiator and capacity to come to a compromise. Where would the lines be? In fact, let me tell you another thought that would be sort of unusual for most.
Please.
My idea is that Zelensky is the best friend of Putin now. Zelensky is doing his best performance in favor of President Putin. Why is that? It's because he's shooting down the initiative of the Friends of Peace of Hungary and Brazil and China. So Putin doesn't have to. Putin can always say, see, they don't want to. It's not us that don't want to negotiate. They don't want your initiative. They are insulting you. They're saying they want to reconquer Donbass. So we're fine. We're open to negotiations. In fact, Putin would want to have more than just 4 provinces. And many Russian generals do too. The Russians really, the Russian society at large wants Odessa and Kharkov, two great Russian cities of Novorossiya. The rest of it is possible. Many decisions. I watched Russian press. There are many variants. If you want, I can discuss those. There's one variant that central Ukraine remains independent country, and it is neutral, and it's international treaty. The variants could be whether it's together with Western Ukraine or not. Some propose that they're the troublemakers, they're the Banderovites, they're the ones who started this whole thing, and they say they have to separate them into a separate entity. And some say, okay, let them go to NATO. We don't care. That little territory next to Hungary and Poland around Lvov, it's so minuscule that it doesn't really matter if it joins NATO. Let them have it so that they could say, aha, Ukraine is in NATO. This is a kind of a giveaway. So this is one possibility. Another possibility is that they all want Ukraine, minus Odessa and Kharkov, and they are neutral, and they are it's a tougher approach, not like completely independent, but they're protectorate of Russia, a satellite, pretty much like Belarus is today, with a government that is made in Moscow. It's like a tougher approach. Then some argue even tougher than that. They just basically say we annex it and it becomes a part of the Russian Federation. Except Western Ukraine, nobody wants to have Banderovites free to travel anywhere they want in Russia and set up terrorist acts. So they have to be separate. But this is not decided yet. This is something that is still being discussed. Putin never says anything himself to keep his options open. Okay. So this is something that is still not clear which way the Ukraine after the war will be set up, but definitely not in NATO.
Yeah, just the last question. I was just thinking, do you think Hungarian independent approach towards Russia can threaten its European Union membership at some stage if this conflict continue to escalate?
I think that if the conflict continues to escalate and the European Union, taking on the hat of NATO, decides to shoot missiles into Russia, and Russia says it was going to respond, and it may respond I don't think it's going to be nuclear. They will probably bomb some Polish airfields where these missiles are, or aircraft or something. My feeling is that many European countries would say, no, we're not a part of it. We're NATO because to be a collective security arrangement to defend us, not to provoke a general war. I really think Hungary would be the first one to say we're not a part of it. Okay. I actually think there are many others could. I think that Italy would say we're not a part of it. They already said we're not shooting into Russia. And I also think in Germany, there's a kind of a rising movement against stationing American missiles in 1996. Germany is waking up. They've had enough. And I think Alternative for Germany, all indications are they're growing and growing into the second most important party, which will have a political effect.
All right. Dr. Brovkin, thank you very much for explaining this unique position of Hungary, where they have, in a position to finding a very difficult balance between, their ties to Russia and to their, counterpart states in European Union. We will continue, similar discussions, and we will highly appreciate your contribution to our show. So till our next video, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Bye.